Hello and welcome to the NEWSPASTE Podcast with me, your host, Johnny Vedmore, and I am here again with, this time, and it's very rare, I'm not sure if I've had a NEWSPASTE podcast where I've had two people on at the same time. It's something that might actually happen more in the future. I might actually get two guests who are in completely different areas together, but this one is going to be an interesting one, especially for those who are interested in living off the land, living with the land, living symbiotically with the land. I mean that. And so here we are. I'd like to welcome Brien Bennett and Jenna Shaputis, and we're going to have a long conversation. Hopefully, a thrilling one for you at home, but whether or not everyone's going to pick up something and learn something from this. So, hello, guys. How are you?
Really well, thank you.
Very good, thank you.
I'm looking forward to this one because this is our first time meeting as well, and I always like having a first moment where you kind of like get to know someone, especially on camera. I think it's nice to be in person with someone. I love in person podcast stuff. I mean that makes it so much easier. But when you're meeting for the first time, you always get a little bit of like you start to see someone's energy slowly, don't you, and etc. So. Start off, Jenna, why didn't you read? You've prepared a little bit, which is kind of like an opener. So open.
Right. Why, thank you. Okay, so our goal today is to convey the services that we've dedicated to small-scale agriculture, forestry practices, and the collection of understanding towards soil health. We both inherently oppose communitarian groupthink, the governance, the laws, compounding to degrade our freedoms. So, our strategic position as landless peasants has cultivated a gravitas in exploring biochar, its historical origin, the logic towards efficient wildfire reduction, because we're in the Pacific Northwest, experimentation, our soil analysis studies. We have put on local demonstrations, and we have also just followed where the industry has led to the carbon tax topic. And also it shows up with the Sustainable Development Goals, which is interesting in itself. And the fad of regenerative agriculture, we would like to talk about that topic. We've worked independently. Brien has 40 years experience working with trees, tree problems as a climber.
No way he's over 40 years old.
40 years experience. No, I know, that's true. He's and we've been together on this property, cultivating the garden space that we've installed. We've installed many gardens, and we have moved around quite a bit, but we've studied this one particularly for 14 years. And my background, I am a mother. I also had a good 10 years as a seamstress, and I view our mill, we have a local portable bandsaw, as like a big sewing machine. So we handle wood regularly.
There's a lot in that opening statement. Go on, keep going. I don't want to stop you.
No, yeah. Well, and also a lot of our work is looking for the future generations and in interest of future generations, perpetuating some skills and knowledge that we've acquired that we think is essential. And we aren't off the grid. It's kind of like a hobby learning, but I love being in the garden. So I'd like to share and encourage that excitement and joy of spring planting. And at the same time, we have been keeping our hands on the pulse of what's out there in the internet. And that's why being landless peasants means we have time, because we don't have to pay a mortgage to be looking into all these things. So there are a lot of topics we'd like to talk about. And I'd like to close here and allow the floor to Brien if he also wants to bring up what he wants to.
So yeah, I had a 13-year-old daughter that succumbed to leukemia almost 20 years ago. And Jenna had this little 8-year-old boy, Hellraiser, and he showed up at putting up loose hay, open to the acquaintances in the neighborhood. And Jenna and he showed up, and he kind of latched on to me because he realized, I want that SOB's job. He's pointing fingers and clearly running things, and I'll hang out with him. I sent him home with a pound of frozen ground beef for his efforts. And so we just kind of hit it off since then. But see, when you have raised a 13-year-old, and there is a huge amount of whodunit in this leukemia disease. And, I was in the middle of internet conspiracies beyond any that any human should have to endure. Jeff Rents, a variety of people. And that kind of led to stumbling across a woman who in Seattle, so we're an hour south of Seattle, but I grew up in Seattle. Here's this Nikki Rapana, and she is talking about anti-communitarianism on Jeff Rentz's broadcast, and I just started eating it up. And that led me to listening to Lark, where he's giving out his phone number and email. Anybody wants to talk about this subject, and I'm completely intrigued because, Nikki was finding this pilot project in Seattle being tried out, and I grew up here, and I've lived with all of this for, all my days. And then, it starts to metastasize, not just the politicians, but the media. And now, 20 some years later, every, News 5 broadcast is so-and-so stop and rob, or liquor store got held up last night. But thankfully, the community is here. And all of these, it's not so much predictive programming, it's social engineering. We have a problem in the world. What are we going to do about it? And on a silver platter is presented the words community everywhere I turn now. Well, I was noticing that when I was started talking with Lark. And so there is a list that Nikki Rapana put together, and several other people have created lists of words that allow for, us to be bamboozled in sustainable justice. It's 150 words in one of Nikki's glossaries on her book and website. I try and stay away from that kind of slave speak, anatomy of, and the like, but I realize how they're doing this. So, yeah, I wanted to get to the bottom of this leukemia thing, and it's not cut and dry. You go to the Children's Hospital doctors, well, we don't know. Well, then I go to a bookstore, University of Washington, and ask the lady, can you help me? I'm looking for problems, that might be bringing about this childhood disease. And well, we do have this book. It's from a woman in England in the 50s. And she was tasked with, well, why don't we find out, collecting data, what do all of these children that get this have in common? And Yeah, she does determine things like using x-rays to figure out what your shoe size of a pregnant mother. That x-ray, affects with, clear data. Well, off to the dustbin. Dr. Alice Stewart wrote this, somebody wrote this book about her. I don't want to, go too far into that, but I will say that there's a Dr. Martin Paul. He's a professor in Washington State, retired, and he's big, being sometimes paid, but more often on his own dime, going to all these other countries in Europe and the like to talk about the dangers of EMF. The technology is not just the surveillance and the data collection. There's health problems with all this 5G, blah, blah. So we're talking with him, Jenna and I, line up interviews like we did with Lark and you, and getting Dr. Paul to, try and shed some light. Then we go to somebody like Aman Jabi, who's a big tech, he doesn't like being called a whistleblower. He basically is exposing what all this camera technology is doing. When people, I call them the simple-minded, but it is the vast percentage of the media, including the alt, when they're jumping up and down, they're after our guns, Johnny. I'm on saying, first of all, he lives in Montana. You're going to have a real tough time with the crowd he knows. No, these school shootings are about the cameras. Mm-hmm. So it's not cut and dry, and we're being bamboozled by 90-some% of the alt media into being socially engineered. So yeah, this is the kind of thing we do and talk about and try and make some headway with. That's my opening statement.
Yeah, so those are two full opening statements. I like some of that was just enthralling for me, especially hearing you speak there, Brien. The way you speak is really with direct, definite passion for getting to the answer. And that's what you project out of me, both of you, in actual fact, going down that path of trying to understand, like we all do, what our life has been about, how it's been shaped, who shaped it, why it's been shaped. I mean, I feel terrible for you. You've lost someone in your life at one point who's young and had an entire life to live. And I also I sympathize with you in a way that is two ways, because I know, like, I'm my cousin who I was very close to, she was a year different, she died when she was 18, and they called it sudden death syndrome, and I don't like that. I don't like that at all. It's never made me happy. I got Graves' disease, and I had Graves' disease. I had my thyroids moved eventually after radioactive treatment. I'm sitting in a room, I'm opening up this flask with silver stuff in, and I'm realizing they've convinced me to drink radiation, and trying to think about how that works. And even, like, I had to just, like, pretend these things weren't happening to an extent. I had to kind of, like, block it off and not think about it properly, logically, because it's too hard. And what you're doing is something which loads of people don't do, which is trying to look at something that's been a tragedy in your life logically. And it's one of the most dangerous things, because it'll change society. Because if something isn't wrong, as something if it isn't right, if something doesn't make sense, there's a reason. There's logically you can come to a conclusion of that. So I don't know where to start, because I also love, like, they're like landless peasants. That is what I think we all are. every single one of us. It's been like written in the contract in our society to make us so that we think we own stuff, or we think we have a house, or we think we have something, but they've underwritten everything to just be taken away whenever they want to. And we are all landless peasants. The majority of people don't actually realize that. So when you use it, you may use it in one term, but I see that as a like a much sort of like wider thing. There's so much there to talk about. So let's start right at that point. What have you? If I was to start off by not asking you for details of what you've done, but we'll get there. But Brien, what is it that you think you conclude to be the reason for leukemia or such diseases happening now? Not we'll go through why you've come to those, but what is your conclusion?
Well, I'm going to say that, like I mentioned, we have interacted in a very large amount, and Jenna has the Facebook page and I use it. So half the time people think they're talking to her. But there's a Cindy Niles in Australia, and we're back and forth in her chat room. Maybe she's done some lives. She reads the comments and answers them. And yeah, well, so you say, what do I think? Well, it's confusing. It was Dr. Paul that said, no, it's both ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. So, in this before mentioned Alice Stewart book, she's saying a embryo in uterus is exposed. Well, I'm looking at the Chernobyl accident and the date of it and my daughter in mama's belly. Mm-hmm. So I'm off on, I figured it out. Dr. Paul comes along and says, well, how about cell phones and other forms of radiation? It's not definitive. And back to the Cindy Niles, we're communicating on the internet live, and she says, Brien, don't forget about the vaccines. They are also linked to it. And then it would just put my brain in a big swirl of confusion, but it doesn't. Of course, there's going to be multiple things involved in this, and you should keep an open mind. You don't have all the answers, Brien. You have some aspects of it, but yeah, how many vaccines did my daughter get in the first 5 years? Well, her mom wanting to do the right thing, and she'd go to a doctor, and the doctor would say, here as an expert is what we recommend. Well, sign her up. Don't want to have, miss out on any of that fun.
I'm not sure how many people could convince. I've had all of this experience. I mean, we've been we're talking about people pre-COVID as well. So that was a massive learning, like joint learning experience. But I've had loads of experience now researching it all. But 10 years ago, I would have been down with the system on vaccines. They would have sold it to me, So how do we get across to all of the people? Because that not only vaccines, I mean, just all of this, I think it's an attack on all fronts, and is just tiny little attacks on all fronts, or at least the effect it's going to have is minute in like percentage points. So you don't see masses of fluctuation. You don't see a pattern easily, and they can always cover it up. But I think it's attacks on all sides. So how do you make people realize, someone who loves their kid, that they shouldn't be filling their kid up with now, which something like 30 different vaccinations in a 2-year period, something along those lines. I can't even believe those numbers. I don't like even saying it out loud. It just doesn't even make any sense. Someone said it's something like 70 something different injections, because some you need to have in stages. I just don't understand how that's possible.
So we're going to let Jenna talk.
Okay.
But first,
Good idea.
as to that subject, why communitarian battling is so important to me is it was this Nikki Rapana that people would ask her, what can we do to get out of this? Quit picking a side. Right, left, gay, straight, white, colored. That's when they got you. She's on camera. You can see her blonde hair and she's being interviewed. That has to be in the forefront because Jenna and I had a lot of acquaintances and we are on their shit list because you see Terrain and Germ and Kevin McCarran and Dr. Kevin McCarran and Charles Rixey, U.S. Marine.
I know him. I know Kevin, and I know I've talked to him on a fair few occasions. I know them. Me and Charles have interesting conversations. They're kind of always like, very polite with each other, but we're always kind of off kilter with each other. Kevin is a firebrand. He's a very nice person. Not if you're on his bad side.
Right.
Yeah, JJ Cooey and what's his name? House of Tonic. Kevin just did a 5-hour over and over laying into House of Tonic. That's what happens when you say publicly. Dr. Kevin McCarran is part of the international cabal, all designed to take down JJ Cooey. You asked for it, House of Tonic, in 5 hours of it you get.
But speaking of persuasion, Brien persuaded my last time filling in for RBN. Brian's like, why don't you have Kevin McCarran on and Dr. Martin Paul together? Two different spheres of study and interest. And I did it, and they had combative ideas about EMFs. But I guess a lot came out through that conflict. But then the callers started calling in, and it kind of got out of hand. And that was why probably that was my last time filling in on RBN. Too much conflict.
But that's what you need a little bit. You need a little bit. I mean, I'm someone who likes to compromise with conversations. I know almost for a fact that I will not agree with everybody, like on really important factors. That includes Kevin, that includes Charles, that includes you two, likely. And I kind of like, I do it so much, like in the way of trying to just compromise and say, well, different folks, different strokes, like in so many different ways, and we can come to some sort of conclusion in the middle. But conflict is part of that. I always have people who try and say to me, like, if I'm pissed off about something and I'm saying about it, they say, oh, calm down. It's like, I'm calm, but this is how it's meant to be. Sometimes you're meant to get passionate. Sometimes you're meant to say your point. Sometimes everything's so obvious and you're just trying to explain it and you just feel frustrated because it seems like there's other people who have got a completely different view. Listen, we can definitely overcome that to an extent, but it sounds like you've got some issues with some of the people in the independent community there.
Well, actually, I also need to praise. I
do.
need to praise some because the conflict on this RBN that Jenna was talking about, Amon Jabi calls up and lays into Kevin McCarran. What kind of communitarianism do you like, Kevin? Apparently you haven't looked into it very much because I have, and it's all bad. And I was just very much enjoying it because it was other callers to RBN which have been at this forever. Very often they know far more than the hosts. The host has other duties.
I've experienced this as being a host.
Yeah, but there are people that have just been magnets for 20, 30 years trying to get to the bottom of this, and they're, giving a high five to Dr. Paul and to Jenna. This is so important that people that don't see eye to eye might come on, and Kevin ended the show with "Thank you, Martin, for coming on." So respectful, but Kevin has kids, and he says, "We don't have any books in this house. My kids look at screens. And if there's something wrong with 5G, I'd sure know about it. Give me some more tech." That's his, opinion, but he's also sick quite a bit, has been my analysis. Anyway, let's move the conversation on. I can't.
Well, I gotta say that, I've accepted that to a certain degree about like living. I've been in the point where, we're going to talk about sustainable stuff later. We're going to talk about proper usage of land and creating a life which is as off grid as you could possibly get, with extra bonuses all on top. We talk about that. And I also live in the city. I've lived in the city, and I've lived like that, and I've lived in the city, and I live like that. And it kind of like, you're giving up something, a little bit of life, a little bit of lifespan for living in the city. You could feel it, and I think it's getting worse and worse. I think a lot of, like, London feels dead. It feels like as tech takes over, it feels like the inside of a computer. That's basic. It feels like you don't have life in some of these big cities. But I accept that as part of the thing. I've got to. It's like got to be a trade-off. If I'm going to go and do all of this stuff, and I got to have the tech all around me, and the 5G is all going to be around me, so I'm accepting that I'm probably going to be like someone living in Elizabethan times was, living in London. They were much more likely to die like in their 20s rather than someone who lived outside. And I know that lots of people lived for a long time, but okay, so This is I'm really interested in this because we've had lots of conversations on the independent media, about how bad the independent media can be sometimes. It can get really complicated, and there's lots of different sides. What do you think is actually happening? What do you think is actually going on? That's for either of you, but Jenna, you can answer that too.
Well, if she looks at my head, then I think she's feeling like she wants to hand it off to me. But I think she could give it a whirl.
As far as what's going on around us, we have taken in ideas of there's a simulacrum about, and the automation and the subject of cybernetics goes back quite a long time. Mm-hmm. And I'm starting to read a book on brain warfare, pretty much. It's like military intelligence book that was referred to me. And I just opened it up last night, and the idea of, it seems as though in real time there's events and information that's automatically keeping their finger on the pulse of people and responding. And it's going back and forth. So much of us rely on the internet at this point that so much of it can be manipulated. So, yeah, especially with this election and the ripple effect that's happening right now. It's very interesting. I can't hang on what's Donald Trump going to say or do next, because it just seems so automatically projected of they're running, they have a system that they're applying to society, to people, and it goes hand in hand with the systematic poisoning through as many different ways possible. The more we look into it, the more it's just
so
like,
you don't think
God.
they're going to make America healthy again then?
Could I just say that Ryan Dawson has a documentary from years back Trump's Zionist ball and chain. Trump is so clearly dirty that there's no way that I could ever make America great again under his dictatorship is what it's looking like. He owns both the House and Senate and is walking around like what Hollywood portrays John Wayne like, but in reality, John couldn't ride a horse, had to have a stand-in for all the films on a horse, and homosexual. It's all an illusion.
There's
And
a lot of gay in the world nowadays. Just look at this. I mean, this is pretty gay. A big neon sign. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
I guess since I'm not afraid of that subject, but we are very much fond of pointing out this atrazine herbicide that Alex Jones was talking about it 15 years ago, the gay frogs. And they're using it to this day. And we can't dismiss the possibility that your soy lattes and the like, this stuff's real. It's not
soy
not
lattes are definitely real, unfortunately. Yeah.
But yet, as to who possibly they might be, how about the name Adam Green?
No.
He is no more news, and I have been, attempting to make some headway with him. I finally got him to ask a question, like I'm typing into his live chat, and he asks his guests, how about communitarianism? Ever heard of it? And the guest, who I trolled for 6 months, said, no, never heard of it. So Adam says, well, I have looked into it, and I think there's something to this problem, but it was just today.
This is just amazing. This is this conversation right here. Sorry to cut you off, because this conversation is amazing, because straight away, I mean, we're talking about, I was asking you a question about the independent media community and how complicated it is. And the first thing you did was talk about Ryan Dawson, who I've had like history with, like backwards and, well, only forwards. He doesn't talk to me. Just he is not a fan of my ex, and they were having a backwards and forwards all of the time, and that knocked on. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not a big fan of the sort of, especially the everything is Israel line. Is like, so much is Israel, but it's all a big great intelligence blob. It's all a big global intelligence blob. It's not just one or the other. And the problem I have a lot with all of the Epstein researchers, because I've done so much Epstein research, and there's so much I haven't shown people yet. I'm getting round to it, but there's one thing that really, all of their stories, the reason why they can say Epstein, Zionist, it's all just Israel, it lets off the CIA so much. And the excuse is always, Robert Maxwell was his, like, sort of mentor style thing. Ghislaine Maxwell he met, and Ehud Barak, and Les Wexner was his funder. But that's like all 7 years after he's already started working for the CIA. So it's like it's only the Zionists, when I know Epstein was working for the CIA in 1982 in Iran-Contra. So what he started doing in 1987, 1988, 1989 was all just part of the big globalist intelligence blob, and they're all in it together. And it's part of communitarianism. And then you talk about Adam Green, and Adam Green is someone that I've been talking about him with someone in the background. I mean, I'm not someone who I'm interested in who he is, because I was looking at the Matthew North case and him disappearing, and that's like, there's someone who knows a lot about that, who I'm in communication with, and we're having a conversation, and I'm looking at Adam Green and some of the things he's saying, and I responded to him. I said something to him for the first time in just the other day. So it's amazing you bring up Adam Green, because I think, I'm really open about the fact that I think that maybe up to 60% of the independent media is just created, constructed characters, and then there's a load more who don't know they're just being manipulated by other people all of the time, and there's hardly anybody out there who's independent. And every time I look into one of them, I go, oh man, such a load of gripes all of the time. I'm pissed off with him, I'm pissed off with him, I don't believe he's a real person, don't think she's a real person. And it's a lot of the time it turns out to be true. They seem to be constructed. They got things in their past that don't make any sense. So I think the place is a complete mess. It's like we can't even talk here and not, like, every step of the way. It's like these are such divisive or people who and I don't know what's really going on. So it's really interesting we're having this conversation now, because I was just in with someone who is also in the independent media, and we were having this conversation as well. How much of this do you think is true or not? How many people do you think are acting in people's best interests? And what have you decided to do to kind of get over that clear lack of trust with people on the independent media?
So hold on. So Adam Green just yesterday did a broadcast. I'm typing away and posting as a squirrel. And I said, we've been trying to get a Kermeo Ahu on an interview, and he agreed to it. He just, I think he's smoked so much cannabis. He has a couple of teenagers, and he just says, you got to keep pestering me on Telegram. Well, that's what I typed into Adam Green. You keep calling it communism when clearly you've had plenty of opportunities to realize the Chinese are embracing capitalism. Putin and the Russians are at the, telling Jeffrey Sachs that, no, we don't want to, we want part of what you guys got. And Jeffrey Sachs trying to, as a diplomat, return to the United States and getting the double finger salute from our so-called government here. But the Kermeo Ahu and Adam Green would have a great, discussion, because Adam is very much, I'm a pagan, I want to, worship idols carved out of stone and wood. But Kermeo is insisting the United States or in North America is where the Israelis came from. There's writings and traditions in Native American cultures that are done in the Middle East, but we didn't get them here from there. They got them from us, ship travel and cultural exchanges, these mounds, the caves. We be intelligent beings for 100,000 years, and somebody's trying to shove this Jewish fairy tale of a Bible story down both the Christian and the Jewish people's, like that's the end all be all. Well, Kermeo's got himself some old books that creates his opinions on this. What I would like to see is a dialogue with this kind of discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the perfect world.
Yeah, but no one's that's not what's gonna happen because people argue all of the time and then they avoid arguing. I really do think we should do probably a tiny bit more arguing, but it's hard to get people. I'm about to do a show where I want to kind of a quiz show where I want to get two people together and I want to mix people from the independent media and start to see if I can break some echo chambers as well. Get introduced different people to different people and cross them over and do it in a way that they don't have to feel threatened by each other, and then we can like progress from there. But it's not the way it goes. I mean, it's media bubbles. There's different beliefs. I love a bit of this when you're talking about this and you're talking about different things, different like ways to view the past, especially when it comes to a religious. So, are you religious? Are you guys religious? Jenna, you tell me about your faith.
Well, I would say that I feel best myself in nature.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the natural order in nature, I think, is the closest thing to creation, and I like to be by it.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to, wildcraft and learn. I just feel my best within that place. So
you're
that's
of
the closest.
earth.
Yeah, I think so. And, I can wonder. I was raised Christian. I had to, I went to a parochial school. I went through all of the rites of passage in the Catholic faith. And I respect other people's religion, but I think that nature is my closest study to being one with. And I do feel that, we all have this amazing gift of like inspiration and mind and thought. And I wonder, well, where does it come from? And that is part of the gift that we have. And I think creation inserted us as humans with these special talents that radiate that power.
Yeah. I like the idea that it's like a constant expression of life is the actual thing itself. And when I've explained my own so not religious belief, but my own spiritual belief to someone who's quite knowledgeable about this sort of stuff, he was like, that's quite close to being Gnostic. And I was like, is it? Oh shit. You don't even know what you are until you kind of like, I'm sort of have this feeling that it doesn't really matter. If I believe, for instance, that we're in a simulation, simulations all the way down, it still leaves me with the fact I have these feelings within this realm, and I experience these things, and I see these things, and I see other people's experiences, and it leaves me with a bigger vision. And so I can't do anything about the rest of the stuff, but I can do stuff about the fact that I'm the center of perception from my own reality. So I mean, I don't know if that's godly. I think the whole thing together must be godly, whatever heaven is, whatever the everything is, but I don't know. I wouldn't say I'm religious. What about you, Brien?
Irish Catholic. I've actually gone back and met my relatives out in the cow fields in Ireland. My mom ended up in Detroit. They have, in that era, very particular neighborhoods. And yeah, when my dad proposed to her as a English Protestant background, that was the arrangement. You will join. And so he slept through many a sermon. It was kind of my job to elbow him in the ribs and say he was snoring. Then from my 1st through 8th grade parochial, I moved on to the all-boys Catholic Jesuit high school in Seattle.
Mm.
And since I was about 8 years old, something happened in my sitting in the classroom, and I said, I ain't buying any of this.
Mm.
So since then,
I was about the same age when I was like, no, it was like I had to be confirmed. I was Protestant, like, but I had to be confirmed when I was like 9 or 10, and I was just, this is the point where I'm just not going to do it. That's all right. I'm out. But I had to pretend to be confirmed to get into the high school that my parents needed me to get into. So kind of I had to lie about it all for a year at least, and then be like, hey, what can you do about it now? But you grew up without religion then, or like you grew up like after that time? Did you continue going to church? Did you get made to?
no, I was, motorcycles and leather pants and
That's fantastic.
my mom, I was 18 or very close to it, and you need to get a job with a company, an insurance, pension. So yeah, she didn't want me to turn out like her dad, who was a bootlegger. I can't pronounce the word, but something like poteen
That's pretty cool.
is Irish potato whiskey.
Yeah.
And the
I think
cops
that's
would
loads
come
of
knock.
parts of my family are like bootleggers, I reckon.
So yeah, the cops would knock on the door and why is your garage snow roof melted, Patty? And he would just march his 3 or 4 girls out and say, well, you see these girls here, and would you consider just having a slight nip? And he'd get away with that. And that's what my mother was worried I was gonna follow in the footsteps. She wanted me to get a decent job. And to tell you the truth, my religious beliefs have been none until I found Kermeo Ahu and the information he's been sharing. And we wanted an interview. He called us on the phone. He has to kind of vet people that want to have him on because he doesn't want to get ambushed. That's happened to him before. So how's that for my answer to your?
Yeah. It's hard. Religion's a hard one.
I have a bunch of interest in history and geography. My brain's a magnet for it. And the more I look into those subjects, and it was just a month or two ago, Jenna was going to do a Lithuanian history broadcast, and I find out, Lithuania was the last European country to accept Christianity, and Ireland was the first. So, yeah, that Jenna's
Ireland
parents,
definitely was the first. What, Jenna's parents were the first?
No, they were both of Lithuanian heritage, and if you knew the Germans and the Russians wanted to rip that place.
I like that area. I like Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia. The people there, I've met a fair few. I was a couple of weekends ago. I was actually drinking with a load of Latvians, and wow, they do party hard. They do.
Don't forget that it's spitting distance from Ukraine that's in the news these days as the new homeland for Israel 2.0. And of course, the Holodomor happened in the breadbasket of Europe. They had to do a little cleansing. And so when anybody asks me of my religious interests, I say, seems like a really good excuse to kill people. They've been doing it for a long time over this subject. And for that reason, maybe I'll just keep my opinions, if I have any, to myself. It's got a bad track record. End of rant.
Hey, Jenna, so were your parents born in Soviet Russia then?
No. So 1943, Grandma and Grandpa got a knock at the door. The Latvian mayor said, the Russians are coming right now. You're going to be sent shipped to Siberia, you better leave. So grandma took, you know, the tablecloth, threw some stuff in, the bamboo pole, and they took off. So they spent 7 years. It took them 7 years to get to America.
They just slipped out the back door. Really.
They did. And they wound up in a work camp, a deported person's work camp in Augsburg, Germany. And my mother was born there.
Oh.
Better watch out, Johnny. You know, they go after the intellectuals.
Well, I'm all right
You've been
then.
warned.
Yeah, I know. I still don't consider myself as an intellectual, though, because I always, I didn't do well at school.
I know I did not. I did not.
I was a very naughty boy. So what was it like? Like, you grew up in America, though, I take it then?
Oh, yeah, I did. My mom came over at age 5, and they ultimately migrated to Chicago.
Was it, did they meet other people from, were they hanging around with other Lithuanians back then? Very much so. And Chicago had a really Lithuanian community, I take it.
South side of Chicago, Market Park.
Park, Lithuania heaven, Lithuanian heaven.
Lithuanianville. Yeah, they just spoke Lithuanian. So I remember going there as a kid, but yeah, my mom didn't speak English. She failed kindergarten her first year. She wasn't naturalized till she was 16, but my dad was born in the United States. His dad went back and forth. But yeah. So the food, the culture, the language, after Market Park was being gentrified and intentionally messed up by Southern immigrants being put, like all of these Black people ended up migrating up. And Michael Jones said that was an intentional breakup of strong connections that were nationals. You know, Lithuanian nationals were all there, and then there was a Polish neighborhood, an Irish neighborhood. All of that was broken up in the 60s.
Michael Jones.
Michael. So Grandma and Grandpa ended up moving across the street from my parents in the south suburbs. So I had a good chunk of 10 years with Lithuanian being shouted around, but it wasn't cool to learn Lithuanian. So Grandma and Grandpa would say it in Lithuanian, say it in English, and then say it in Lithuanian, and I would just wait for them to say it. But I don't know, some words stick.
How do you say I am in Lithuanian? Like I am John.
Let's see. Well, let's see. Hello is labas. Goodbye is sadevo. I am cold. Ash.
So it is. So it's the same as Estonian then. I learned it in Estonian, Ash, so I could say Ash Johnny to people. I've learned in Yasem, Yasom, Yastem, Ya, all of the different regions like Czech, Slovakia. You can kind of like see the way it works, and you get up to the Lithuania and Estonia, then it is Ash. Ash, good. I live in Wales and I speak English all of the time, because they took our language away by force at one point. And it's kind of like, you know, it's really nice to know that you've got this whole different connection to culture as well. I found it's really strange. The next generation, the generation that lived under the Soviet Russia, they feel, I get a feeling from hanging around with them, they feel like they're Russian. So whatever the Russians did to them worked really well, because they were like, they saw themselves still as like they grew up under Soviet rule. So they were just like, oh, it's awesome. Like it was a bit hard to get food and stuff, but still it was awesome. Like, you know,
right. For years, yeah, we knew that they couldn't, you know, they were taught Russian. They had to speak Russian. But for years, I remember Grandma and Grandpa packing up peanut butter and Levi's jeans to ship back home, because they still had maintained letters would come back and forth. But a lot of this, when I would ask questions about their time, and it was so tumultuous, and I think en route my grandma lost a baby also. So she would never allow it. You know, at the table, she would be like, we're not talking about that. Because Grandpa would say, you know, he would mention Stalin this, Stalin that.
Do you remember the war? No! Along those lines, yeah.
We got a TV in America, and we're not gonna.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it's crazy. It's crazy. Did you grow up in Chicago then?
I grew up in the south suburbs, so a good 45-minute commute. And when I got out of high school, I wanted to get out of the house, so I moved to Chicago. And I spent a good 6 years there, you know, waiting tables, taking classes at a community college, and kind of just having fun. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
Chicago's a crazy place. Loads of history there. Loads.
Yeah.
The most naughtiest people seem to be, you know, lean towards Chicago's. I suppose it's got the same with Irish community as well then. So is that where you're from Seattle though, Brien, yeah?
Yeah,
But
I
you
just
lived in
know
Seattle
from
all your life.
all my life. Yep. My dad bought a 57 black Thunderbird convertible, put my mom in it, and I'm going to Seattle. And he started renting and started in the right neighborhood and getting the right jewelry and the suits, and just silver-tongued his way into a multimillionaire.
Oh, nice.
And I wish that he had read Ken Kesey's book, Sometimes a Great Notion, and found out that there is a tide change. This clear communism, capitalism isn't going on anymore. And yeah, he got in a squabble with the GI Bill involving one of his students who said, look, it says right in the contract, you guarantee me a job if I take your sales training course. And he said, no, it says in the contract, we'll continue to work with you till we give you the skills to get a job. But this is America. This isn't a communist country. Well, my dad never got the memo. The United States had been taken over. And yeah, he lost everything, 7 kids in the house. And they came and picked it all up, house included. And he had to start all over again.
There you go. Well, let's go on. Let's go on. That's awesome to hear your stories, though, because I just love. That's one of the things I do in all my articles as well. I end up going through people's sort of like a little bit of their family, because just it seriously is what builds up what you believe, even if you don't realize it straight away. It's everything is things that went on before you were alive have molded you so much, and that is it's a fascinating thing to explore. Well, what are you doing now then? What are you doing now? Because we're going to talk about like how you're trying. How long have you been? Are you off grid? Are you part off grid? Are you what type of living are you doing?
28-foot travel trailer.
26. It's 26.
The idea was proposed. Maybe we'll get you a trailer, and because we got kicked out for having the political viewpoints opposed to the Green Revolution and the whole lefty thing, and we're constantly playing crap on the internet, and the guy just was making no headway convincing us to become more left-leaning, and he said the girlfriend can't handle it anymore, and she's really important to me. And
30 days notice. So he has 2 tons of agricultural equipment. He has a lot of stuff. So 30 days to find a place for us and our stuff was pretty scary. But Brien had his sawmill located across the street and had good communications and work exchange. They made small contracts together. Brien did some tree work for him, milled up some of his logs. He's like, I got you guys. So within 30 days, he bought us a trailer. So we settled here on his 8 beautiful acres, and the sawmill's still here, and there's always tree work, and there's always things that come up. I think they call us like the superheroes, like call Jenna and Brien. We need them. And imagine an incident commander's hat on Brien's head.
Okay,
he's very good.
Flashing lights, like reindeer antlers. I see it.
Reflecting everywhere. Yeah. If there's an incident, call the commander. And so we've been here for 7 years. And even before we moved here, Brien's like, how about a garden? You guys need a garden. And Eric's like, I don't have time for a garden. And he's like, no, we want a garden on your property. So he said, yeah, go ahead. So Brien fenced in about 1,000 square feet. And even though we were living across the street, I would go back and forth because there were gardens over there too. And we just started working this hard pan clay and just building soil. And it's improved over the years. It's improved greatly. And that's with the learning that we've done with another associate of Brien's who has run an organic garden and nursery for about 35 years and wants to save the world. Gary Klein, he is 84, and he thinks he can save the world with healthy soil and nutrient-dense food. And that has been his focus for as long as we've known him. And when we were super poor, he's offered to do soil analysis for us to, kind of start building at getting some balance to hard pan clay. And he's like, just focus on the good. Because at one point I got a readout and had crazy levels of aluminum. And I'm like, where is this aluminum coming? Of course, my conspiracy mind is the chemtrails are killing our soils.
I'm there with you. Screaming in the park.
And Gary, he's just like, just focus on the positive. Just focus on the good. What can you produce here? And just keep on paying attention to your mineral balance.
So Jenna can catch her breath.
Thanks.
I would just say, yeah, we created this vegetable garden right on the driveway coming in here. And at that time, the owner, who's younger than I am, he was divorced and he was dating. And he meets this woman who has a huge interest in culinary and actually putting on events.
A woman who likes to cook, he said.
Well, she'd gone to cooking school and wanted to use something with that education.
Right.
She pulls in the driveway on the first date. What's that? Oh, that's the vegetable garden. Oh.
So, yeah, we're going to take personal responsibility for them getting married because we put a garden in. Yeah.
So finishing that little story, they're sitting on the porch, they've done some dating, and now it's time to, where are we going to go with this? Well, I've always wanted a event space. And his reply is, I have a collection of more fire trucks, antique fire trucks, anywhere west of the Rockies. I have them in a barn, but I've always wanted a phony baloney firehouse, with the pole you slide down. And
there's a lot of words in this. I like it. It's brilliant.
So they got married.
The outfits, yeah.
The kitchen has a imported French red enamel 6-burner.
It's amazing. And the cool thing is, since we've been helpers here on this property, I've got to see from base up, from Brien clearing the trees for the foundation to get laid and all the contractors coming in and top notch construction, all of it. I remember tying all the zip ties to the heated water pipes that were embedded in the concrete floor. It's an amazing creation. They both have a great eye for design, and it's a phony firehouse. It's there. So we watched that whole progression and them putting on these huge events.
So addressing are you off grid? No, we're a bedroom community 10 minutes from downtown Olympia. There's a lot of farms out here, but unfortunately the eco-terrorists make making a living at that very difficult. And the DNR, Department of Natural Resources, they buy up these down on their luck and create salmon habitat. They replant fir trees in pastures that old guys pulled with stumps with horses and dynamite, and they're rewilding. And so, yeah, we live 10 minutes from town. I am happy to be a landless peasant for the one reason that, see, we shoot our mouths off a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We would be pretty panicked to have that mortgage and all of what we've earned in our days of the barn, and everything is in questionable security when you get targeted, and targeted individuals exist. I'm happy to be able to use my voice. I encourage other people to call in to live shows, lay into these people, harass them hideously, be a troll, be a spook. This needs to happen, but not everybody's, some people are like married and explaining to their wife that the house they just bought and everything is going to be compromised because of my shooting my mouth off on the internet, on Facebook, and all of that. This is going to be real. Dragged into a court.
We need more people shooting their mouth off. To be perfectly honest, not less.
I see the YouTubes of guys in Britain, cops banging on the door. You're shooting your mouth off on Facebook, and you're coming down to the station.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 100%. There's a lot of overreach, and there's a lot of new powers coming. In Scotland, there was some severe powers that you could cause someone to be slightly distressed, and that means that you've committed a criminal act, and it's like slightly distressed means you've called them something they don't like, or you've told them something they don't like. And it gets down to this, where the rubber meets the road. Like people don't only get banned online, it goes into the real world, and online soon will be the only world where your money is accepted, and where your whole it's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to use their money, their currency, whatever is CBDCs or whatever.
Yeah, I've been listening to Jeffrey Sachs encourage every country to go to the CBDCs as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and let's add some more sustainable development goals to the 17.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He helped write them.
Oh, what a wonderful man. I mean, they used to say burn the witch, but nowadays you just say it's not PC. So, I reckon that these guys are some of the worst in society, and they are the ones who are building the society that you don't want to happen. So, communitarianism is really just globalism, isn't it?
I think it's the system, but also the ideology that inherently people suck in. Like, okay, I had a life experience of when my son was 14, I had pulled him out of school. He was breaking into neighbors' homes to get into their computer to game and watch movies. And he was complaining that I wasn't allowing him internet access. So one of these neighbors called CPS. CPS comes down the driveway to take him away in the van. And I was asked to give a tour of our house, open the fridge, how many toothbrushes, and I was under investigation just by the snitch factor. So it like communitarianism, if people are actually accepting these systems as real, there won't be a need for police anymore because everyone will be, you know. So it's more than just globalism, because it gets in the mind of how people are going to be reacting in.
It's behavioral insights is what I've been talking about, nudge units and stuff, where they make, like during COVID, they make people show disgust towards people who don't take the vaccine. So it just causes them an emotive response, but it's actually training these people to manage each other and to say, oh, this is socially awkward, so the right thing I've got to do is be disgusted with you. And so it's just giving them the tools that society manages itself, and they need less police. They can have their little drones around the place, and just spy in everybody's phones and everybody's homes and everybody's cars and all of the street cameras and the other cameras and the satellite cameras and the on and on and on and on and on and on.
So as to labeling it globalism, I think Nikki Rapana and Larkin, Texas would say, take every ism you ever worried about and they combine into communitarianism. So who's the big bad boogie guy going to compound on the door? I think if you go back to the Macy conferences in the 50s, there was a Norbert Wiener who had learned how to track airplanes in World War II and use artillery to take into account the traveling speed of the ammunition, and he ends up at the Macy conferences because, well, we want to figure out how no one is going to be able to pin it on us, because we want the community to community policing and the broken window theory, all these things play into it. But a lawnmower has a governor on the carburetor, so you get into the tall grass, it bumps up the throttle to, it adjusts itself. So yeah, chasing the Rothschilds and the Bilderbergs, and no, it's the community's pounding on your door and saying, you know, you biochar people, let me just tell you, we sit at home, we're government workers, we are in our underwear in front of the keyboard, getting paid very well. Come 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we need a little exercise. We go for a walk, and it's you two, and what do you got, a tractor?
What you got in that tractor? You got some sort of biochar in that tractor.
Well, it's
smoke producing.
Didn't you get the memo? Trees live forever. There is no reason to ever run a chainsaw in a tree because, you know, I don't know, these are God's creation or whatever. We are under attack for using petroleum. Mm-hmm. And then, even though there's, you know, all these wildfires in California, we're trying to mitigate hazard. And I can spot trees that need to be tended to ahead of time. It comes from having to deal with people not with that mindset that want to hire you, and it's time to go up this rotten thing, and you may get to live through the day. I spot this stuff, and the homeowner's just like, you say so. And so, yeah, we're making some smoke on their beautiful walk. And yeah, I could see the fire department pulling in. We've had repeated calls. There's a temperature inversion, blah, blah. You've broken protocols. Eventually, they will outlaw burning. Of course they will. You got to have a chipper or some other.
The smell is lovely.
So that Macy conference, that needed to be mentioned. I think this is the plan.
So how they've taken biochar into...
This is, before we go any further, Jenna, explain biochar to everybody, because it's just entered into the lexicon, but explain biochar properly.
Sure. Oh, well, it is charcoal, And because there's a biological aspect to its application, it's now called biochar. But charcoal it's made by heating biomass and denying it oxygen. So it's not ash we're creating. The charcoal itself, something like what you'd put in your barbecue, is void of all of its volatiles. So it's highly structured and has all these micropores in it, and it makes a beautiful clinking sound, almost like glass, and it has an iridescence, just like charcoal drawing. It's beautiful. So either way, if it's made properly, that's what you got, this lightweight charcoal material. And biochar has become prominent in the agricultural world, in our world, because what it can do for the soil. Because we've learned that, probably since before the Dust Bowl, the soil has become depleted with the use of synthetic fertilizers forever. And that was the quick fix for farmers, large scale, worldwide. These synthetic fertilizers that didn't incorporate trace minerals, all the things that soil uses to actually become like a living soil, something that could produce healthy, mineral-rich foods. Mm-hmm. So the story of our discovery of biochar goes back to the Amazon basin, and I guess in the 1500s, there was a civilization down there that were utilizing charcoal for sanitation and fertilization. And so that's what we've learned. And that's what, there's 1,000 ways to make it. There's kilns, there's on the ground, there's, I'm sure, and industrial size that can produce massive 24-hour, cycles of making this industrial scale distribution of biochar. But we've learned that you can make it in your backyard. Mm-hmm. So did I do a good, is that enough explanation of what it is?
Explanation, yeah.
Okay. So all those micropores hold space for minerals, hold on to moisture, and hold on to minerals that you want to stay, because it doesn't break down. That's a key element. It's calcified carbon, meaning after it's in that solid state, this finished state, it won't break down, which is wonderful, because we want the minerals and moisture to stay in the soil, not leach out.
So rumored to not break down for 1,000 years is where the scientists would state it, maybe more than that, but regardless, you put minerals in it by, you can soak urine, which has a bunch of minerals.
Phosphorus.
Yeah, it's one of the favorite things. Soaking urine is one of my favorite things to do.
And then there's all these sea crops. We're on the salt water. England's surrounded. All these minerals that have been washed through farming into the salt water we could reverse the process. So we trade and purchase sea crop liquids, crabs and salmon. They get emulsified. That ain't it. We take that emulsion from those waste products, and put it in the charcoal. It sucks it up and it keeps it. It rains a lot here, and those precious nutrients are leached out quite readily. So everything would be hunky-dory in the biochar world, but I mentioned this Cindy Niles. She's a little sweetheart in Australia. On the phone, we're talking on Facebook, and she says, let me get this straight. I've got a wood stove. You mean to tell me I could make charcoal tomorrow in my wood stove and put it in my garden, and my chickens would love it? Everything's hunky-dory. Got a problem here, Johnny. It's part of the climate hoax. I'm not going to go on my page and risk people thinking that I want to, there it is on one of the Sustainable Development Goals. Toxic poison. Yeah. Well, listen to what Nikki Rapana said. Pick a side, either side, and it's completely screwing us up
Mhm.
because, I don't share those left-leaning things. I'm not a Republican Democrat. I'm simply wanting to do this because, there's 55 uses of it. According to Kelpie Wilson down in Oregon, I don't want to get burned out.
Mhm.
I know about fire. And when I see how many times this area, they cream it for the timber and they don't clean up. They just light it on fire and clean up that way. They've done it here several times, and it is a complete nightmare waiting to happen. There has been no, they call them controlled burns. Well, you're not going to control burn in Puget Sound. There's way too many. This isn't Eastern Oregon cattle country or anything like that. We are in a hell of a pickle, and we'll return to, if Jenna and I had a dozen 12-year-olds that would show up on their bicycles with gloves and boots, it could be done without machinery. But as soon as we have this motorized wheelbarrow, simplest thing, great manufacturer, came our way. You put some little kid behind that and say, here, you want to drive a tractor? Just grinning ear to ear. Look at me, Mom. I want to be a farmer with Jenna.
Yeah.
So there is the possibility of not being a pack mule all day, kids, but there is instances that this equipment, even a small skid steer on tracks, excavator, they compact the tree roots. And this can be way more devastating to tree health. They even just say running a chainsaw and removing the brush around a tree. Now the sun is going to beat down on what it wasn't beating on. We were 116 Fahrenheit a few summers back here.
Mm-hmm.
This is unprecedented. I lived here all my life, and something's up with the atmosphere. And you can ask more questions. That's my attempt at.
Well, I was just trying to think. Well, when you were talking, then I was just trying to work out, what's wrong with the atmosphere? What's going on? Do you think?
Okay. Well, most recently, we have Brien called Jim Lee of climateviewer.com. He found his number and called him up years ago. And once in a while, Brien will just pick up the phone and Jim's there and they talk. So he has his theory, and I can repeat it because it seems pretty understandable, that the jet fuel over the past 20 years has changed into a more particular pollutant. And this is also kind of interesting because there is an international understanding of where planes can fly. They're not supposed to go up into the stratosphere. And according to Jim Lee, the wealthy elites, they go up there. But what happens is those particulates and pollutants, they stay up there, and it takes years for it to come down. But it's the pollutants that are actually changing the visibility of the sun in the sky. And it is done intentionally because ORCA and all the air quality people, they just won't listen to. We've seen so many, council meetings where people are like, stuff is killing our crops. Or once in Oakville, Washington, there's a movie about it. Blobs of goo rained down on this little town in Washington, and some people got really sick from these blobs. Mm-hmm. And it could have been an experiment. We know that those experiments, independent of the jet fuel pollution, contribute to what's going on. But the metal particulates, there's a relationship with EMFs, I think. Yeah, that's my best stab at it.
And I will piggyback and say, very recently, Jim Lee, climateviewer.com, had Del Bigtree interview him, and he was really thrilled to get that conversation. It makes everybody suspect, and Del Bigtree definitely is on my suspect list. But
well, you got a good suspect list, boy.
yeah, the interview was pretty spectacular because it's
Kevin's
fairly.
Gonna kill me saying that. Oh, Kevin, I don't mean you, mate. Honest, no, I'm joking. Sorry, go on. I'm only playing. He's British, so I can get away with it. Go on.
That was a spectacular interview worth getting knowledgeable on this. But let me just finish. We're trying to get him to look at a 2017 Harvard Geoengineering Forum big panel. And at a certain point, a guest comes on, and she's gone to school and maybe has a associate professorship. Calgary is in Alberta, but Oxford is in England. So both those are on her repertoire. And she says, let me expose you to the mind of a lawyer. And this is on the panel, David Keith is presented and on. But she says, in the world of international law, which we're going to be dealing with if we're going to be risking, we did something that went over to your country, you have to, how is it worded? By Anna Maria Hubert.
The lawyer, yeah.
She says it's a communitarian
law.
Maybe.
She said something like international law in this regard is inherently communitarian. Move on. How do we govern, the airwaves of experiments in solar geoengineering and sky space? How do we govern this? So it's communitarian inherently.
And I would be in big trouble with Lark if I didn't take a moment to say that a key communautaire is, in French, communitarian law, which supersedes all law in the European Union.
Mm-hmm.
So for those people that are saying, I think I'll go with globalism, or you did some great series of articles on the third way, and others have, is it Brett Weinstein? I can't remember. Regardless, that's what inspired me to contact you. Maybe you should talk to Lark. I think the, communitarian law of Europe is what we're dealing with in the United States, and realistically, the whole world is interacting. If one side of the planet and the other have a dispute, how is that going to be resolved? And Lark and I am insisting it's through the communitarian law system that has taken over, along with the replacement of so-called capitalism. Aman Jabi said, don't say communism and capitalism. It's got to be, crony capitalism or whatever. Aman tries to correct me, and I can't. It's really a
stakeholder capitalism, I think they call it.
Right.
I think they call it that stakeholder capitalism. I've been listening to you and thinking the entire time, because you go back to what you were saying about when we were talking about pollution. I mean, there's loads of evidence over in Britain reporting down experiments for years and years. I did an article called Porton Down's Ideological Cloud, and it included they were spraying zinc cadmium sulfide over everybody, like for years and years and years. And some people nowadays, I've spoken to some people on TNT, one person in particular who was saying uh, it's inert. It doesn't really do anything to you, but that's not what the evidence shows. And they were spraying E. coli over people for years, out the back of everything, planes, trains, all over the place. They were just polluting soil as well. Really, it would just stay in the soil and it would just get rained in. So it's just little by little by little by little. So do you think that sort of thing that was happening and provably happening between at least around 1947-ish all the way up to definitely the 1980s, do you think that is gone on and is still going on now? Is that what we're really being attacked by, is some sort of like constant, I don't know what for, but constant chemical sort of castration, I suppose?
Well, as soon as they started introducing the nanotechnology, I think that it's changed, but it's continuous, because all of these things become in our products and our clothes that aren't breaking down. There was a while that we were talking to Tony Pantalleresco in Canada, who was like the expert on everything nano, because he had worked through and suffered from something called, well, he called it nanotoxicity, but other people were calling it Morgellons, where people are having things coming from their skin. So his website, augmentinforce at 50webs.com, is like his library of everything nano. So I do believe these things have continued, but it's become marketed in products, and consumers are taking it and people are building with it, even in health supplements. Once you see something like microcrystalline cellulose, it's like, what's that?
Oh, I got a jar of it next to my bed. I rub on my face. I don't know why.
So, yeah. And, I think that's where the chemistry and understanding, I'm going to take it back to biochar, because biochar is carbon negative. It has a magnetic pull. And positive ions, which ones that are beneficial, like calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus, those are positive, so it draws them together. But at the same time, we know that activated charcoal, and also university studies, they've been studying what charcoal can do for decades in like remediation of toxic waste sites, or like in the Midwest, in Lake Michigan, downstream from an industrial plant, they have these tubes of charcoal that they're just laying in the water streamway and absorbing all of these toxins. So that's what charcoal's potential has. So in my mind, I'm saying the more charcoal, the better in our garden, because I can't stop what would be falling down on our crops, but I can just try to keep health in the soil. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing this university study did was okay, what do you do with all this toxic charcoal now? Well, they're locking it up in concrete. And that's where industry is going, where they're finding all of these great attributes to charcoal for building materials, for structural rigidity, lightness, blah, 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 blah. So they can also lock up what they've just sucked out of that river into concrete and asphalt, which I thought was interesting.
So what would that be for? What how would that benefit the asphalt? Or is it for when it break it up?
It supposedly makes lighter weight concrete and stronger. But the most important thing is, if you lived like somewhere like the Great Lakes and somebody's been using it as a depository for every chemical known to man, and you wanted to figure out a way to not allow your kids to get poisoned, and you set up a way to suck up these things, what are you going to do with the charcoal that has sucked up this stuff? Well, as a temporary 100 year-long solution, laying it on roads as asphalt and or concrete in walls that aren't going to be, exposed to more people. Those are possible, solutions we could dabble in.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then there's the Topher Gardner. We've listened to him talk, and he has a company, Biocharisma. Biocharisma.
They sell carbon suits, like tuxedos, little walking stick, spin.
No, really, really earthy domes. He's building domes and saunas, but he's actually impregnating the walls with charcoal, and he's learned that it actually reflects or absorbs EMFs, so it can become a safe zone within the dwelling from microwave energy weapons, or I don't know, but that's one
just in case that was a thing. It could potentially do that. We're just saying
you never know. Plan ahead.
So Jim Lee and Topher were on a broadcast. It's somewhere on a YouTube somewhere, interviewed by a couple guys, but during it, the questions from the other hosts were, so how much does this paint cost? They used to put lead in paint, and that might be a great way to protect yourself, but it's, expensive to paint when you have to get all the respirators and a government agency to come on your place because you're going to paint with lead. Topher says, well, you can buy this expensive biochar paint, or you could just mix some in your paint.
Mm-hmm. That's cheeky.
Yeah, we do know someone that is EHS, electromagnetic hypersensitivity. One of the and she did a book, Wi-Fi Refugee.
I can't
Wi-Fi
even imagine what it's like to be in that state at this point in technology. I mean, we are going to be just buzzing.
She insists she wasn't always this way, and count your lucky stars that it ain't happened yet to you, but it's going to become more and more prevalent.
Yeah, at that time when she wrote the book, maybe 3-4 years ago, she's documented about 3 million in this country that, can't be in an electrified environment whatsoever. And Shannon, to this day, still can't live in, she's in a dome out in the woods in Northern California, living off grid, and, she can't have a refrigerator. All of those conveniences, some people are living in cars, they have their own homes, they could visit to get their stuff, but they can't deal with the electrification whatsoever, let alone the towers, people with their phones, satellites, all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
which is a lot of that kind of stuff nowadays. And there's some even more coming, because people are going to be happy to accept some sort of AI symbiote eventually, very soon. And you're going to have people constantly with electric, the need to transmit something here or here, and you get a feeling that it's not going to be long before it goes inside the head, and it's probably they're already doing the test for it now, so eventually it's not even just round the corner either. It's happening right now. They're telling us it's upon us. This is the time that we're living in. So it's clear you're trying to. How far out of that world would you like to get? Would you like to be outside it completely? How would you be able to be self-sustainable in every way, do you think? Or do you still need to go? Go on.
My personal feeling is, including radio, I would 100% embrace doing that, and doesn't matter my opinion, because people are so damn in love with it, and there's something new every month. That how are you supposed to explain to a 15-year-old kid that us old fogies, we don't like that dang technology? Well, you have just alienated yourself wonderfully.
Yeah, we still don't have cell phones.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, and because we have a simple lifestyle, which is great, but would I want to get rid of all of it? I mean, there might come a time where if I don't have, a lot of times I can't do things without the cell phone. You know, I can't.
I liked hearing the ring of your old phone earlier. I've missed that ring. I used to like that ring. It was something about the old. I'm my first the first one I had was one of the dial phones, and I loved that. That was one of my favorite things ever. And then slowly it progresses and it progresses and it becomes just something in your hand, and then it becomes something on your head, and then it's not even there. It's not even visible. It's injected inside you, and you are part of the community, both in your head and outside of your head. So,
So before we leave the atmospheric poisons, Jim Lee would probably come on in a heartbeat. You'd probably have to listen to him and Dell, so you got an idea. But Jim's the first to say, no, they've been doing this for 100 years on purpose. U.S. government, what I can't remember, genocide. It's government killing its own, and there's a variety of ways they're doing, but Jim is saying, but you can't get sucked into the misinformation, because you're going to be proven wrong if you're saying this, and this. Yes, there are tanks on these ships, on these boats, on these airplanes, but these are for testing of the weight of 300-pound people on an aircraft. That's what those tanks are, and you are going to suck it up because you listen to this YouTube, and you're going to say, look at the tanks. No, you've been bamboozled by those that want you to be misled. He's the first to say, take the samples of the exhaust of this aircraft fuel burning. It's all the bariums, strontiums, all of it are in the fuel, folks. So we have to get this straight. And Jim would jump at a chance if you felt like getting to the bottom of it. It's not a big thing for me.
Yeah, I find it fascinating. I've talked to people on every angle. I've talked to people who believe that the Earth is completely controlled. The weather patterns are completely controlled to the highest degree. I've talked to people who I've talked to flat earthers. I've talked to here and there. I knew a Mexican flat earther once, and it was just like he was trying so hard to convince me. It was just suspicious. I don't believe he believed in flat earth at all. It just got to the point where he was trying to make me believe in flat earth, But I've seen every single different part of it. I've seen the evidence of how they've sprayed people, and the rumors that constantly come around because of that as well, which can't be verified. But at the end of the day, these people are nefarious bastards. That's it. Whatever means they want to use, at the end of the day, at some point they may use them. They might not be using them constantly. But I do think they're pecking away at us little by little.
Could I just say in this conversation that while we're talking about this or the flat ball thing, meanwhile, the sewage treatment plants with all these forever chemicals are being sprayed on our food crops.
Yeah.
And we're eating. Why is this not something important? And we're busy. They're spraying us again, Jenna. Yeah, Brian, get back to hoeing your row, would you?
They're spraying us constantly in every single direction with something. That's for sure. They are just like, we are just completely over the top, out of control on purpose. Like I say, if you took any moving part away, you wouldn't even notice that much of an effect. But if you took all the moving parts away, it would change everything. It's It's been really interesting. It's been really nice to speak to you for the first time. That's really nice. So, can people? I mean, because you have obviously you're out in the sticks, literally out in the sticks, as we say over here. Where can people find any of your? Do you write it down? Do you put out a blog, etc.? What have you got that people can find you on?
Well, for a short time, well, for a couple of years, I recorded like on my Sony digital camera, a YouTube channel. It's A Squirrel, ASQIRL, and I haven't uploaded many recently because the camera went down for a while, but it comes back to life. I just give it a rest sometimes and it comes back. So there are some short videos, and then I would write some things down about what what I'm proud of in the garden, or some project that we're working on that I thought was interesting. So that's there. And then on Facebook, Brien's really active as Jenna Shaputis on Facebook. So if anybody wants to, I post some things. Sometimes he has me post things, but that's somewhere we're somewhat active. And randomly we have interviews just like today, which was great. It's some way that we can
she does have a YouTube channel, but it is of the quality of a 70s home movie.
That's fine. There's many there's many
you gotta have
YouTube
editing and multiple
time.
I haven't learned how to edit. Maybe one day.
It's if you want to do it. It's hard because I do so much different editing stuff and things. It's become like a bit second nature. But I was brought up with my dad being into cameras, but still most of my early like experience with cameras is exactly that. Old cameras from the past, proper camcorders, high 8 camcorders from the past. Oh, those were the days.
So I'm Irish, so I gotta tell stories. So Cindy Niles said to us, hey, there's a Nikki Rapana Green Virgin Pachamama video, and it's got multiple audio video, and is there any way you guys could dress it up a little bit, because the audience these days are now connoisseurs of taking in their information. If the audio level needs volume adjustments, and so PTL Media Now, we contacted him and said, can you go through this thing, maybe add some of the updated things? And so PTL Media Now has a YouTube channel. Jenna did a 5-part series on communitarianism where she's doing the voice, and they both wrote the script, and he put some great video, because we are not winning this battle. And the kids, the younger people, they have this 5-minute rule. And if you aren't going to pack it in 5, we're packing you in, because you old fogies don't realize. So those would be a couple of Jenna's offerings that she did participate in. That probably on this subject had to be said. We don't have time for a blog. There's too many blogs like this. Gary Klein, BlossomEra.com, and his nursery. Incredible story. He was a Fish and Wildlife, and they didn't like what he was saying. They said, you're moving you to Washington, D.C. And he said, the hell I am. Walked away from his pension and started this nursery, because we are not getting this information out. Weston A. Price, this dentist, traveled the world, and he could see this. People have never used a toothbrush in their life, and look at those choppers. They are eating the right food. And when in World War II, the German prisoner of war camps for the Brits commented, these Brits' teeth are gone to hell.
Oh, you tell me about it. I know how many teeth I've had out.
Why would that be? Because
Go on.
they live on an island with
sugar. An island of sugar. We live on an island of marshmallow and chocolate.
Well,
a high grade chocolate. Not even good sugar or bad sugar. White sugar, cane sugar. Oh.
Right.
And we rub it in our faces like this.
The point I'm making is the island of the UK has a finite access to minerals.
Yeah.
Not so with the mainland of Europe that the Germans have enjoyed. And they are getting things that Gary Klein would love to get this 100-year-old information, this story, because it applies to today. Why are all these people going sick? Well, could it be that they don't? It's mineral balanced nutrition. Mm-hmm. So you can't have too much and not enough. You gotta. That's kind of our gig, is the send for $30, get a lab test, and then you can either analyze the test yourself or you can pay somebody another $30, and they can say, yeah, we'll even sell you a package. So it's nice and simple. Here's a couple of 5-gallon buckets of what you need for 1,000 square feet. And then 2-3 years from now, let's do another test. Are you getting anywhere? Because that place you're trying to get to is known. And Gary Klein is going to go to the grave having nobody ever read his Blossom alerts. It's the information's out there.
Yeah. You too. You, Brien, you're a dangerous man. I wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of you. I know that for sure. You are special. You're both special. Listen, we've been going for about 2 hours, so I want to thank you. It's been awesome conversation. I've enjoyed every moment of it because I've just been listening.
We did too.
Yeah, and it's awesome. So, I thank you for coming on the NEWSPASTE Podcast.
You're welcome.
We enjoyed ourselves immensely.
Yeah.
Excellent.
What we know is that we will end up with many more unemployed